It's 8:49 on the 25th of March, 2022 in Beijing. Good morning, and of course it's the evening in the West, in the US and elsewhere.
Yes, hello.
Jen is with us, having
Yeah.
some difficulties with his camera, so that's why we're
Yeah.
also a bit late this morning. We were dealing with some technical issues. So Jen is with us, but only in sound, so no
Yes.
camera today. Nonetheless, news of the week. This week we have a number of stories to cover. Firstly, we're going to be talking about, or mentioning, Madeleine Albright, the former Secretary of State, has died, and I'll be reading some of Jacobin's commentary on that. It's the 19th anniversary of the invasion of Iraq, the Western or US invasion of Iraq. One of our big stories for today is about hacking. So Pravda, the Russian website or Russian newspaper, was hacked and was publishing large statistics of casualties, Russian casualties in Russia, on the Russian side of their page. On the other side of the conflict, the Ukraine conflict, the British Minister of Defense was hacked, or let's say a prank call was made to him, a video call, and we'll be discussing some of that. The UN Council is going to meet to discuss the Russian claims of US labs, biolabs in Ukraine. In Ukraine, a hypersonic missile was deployed by the Russians. So this is the first use of a hypersonic missile in combat. Also, a Russian transport ship, a large transport ship, was apparently sunk in the port of Berdyansk in the south of Ukraine, or southeast of Ukraine. North Korea has tested a new ICBM. There was also a meeting of an F-35 jet and a Chinese J-20 jet in the South China Sea, which is apparently the first time these two fifth generation jets, is it fifth generation jet?
Yes. It's the first time they've openly been reported to have encountered.
Yeah, sure. Biden will also be approving the deployment of killer drones called Switchblades. We'll be talking about that. There was a plane crash in South China, and we will be talking about that. Apparently, one of the black boxes has been found. A big story for us today is rubles for gas. So Putin has announced that countries unfriendly to Moscow must pay for gas with rubles, which is talking about energy is a weapon, as well as the economics of this war, the bigger economics of energy economics behind this. In other sort of things that he mentioned, of course, is that NATO is planning to bolster its troop presence near Ukraine. So Jens Stoltenberg said that he will double the alliance's battle groups on the east, so in Bulgaria, Romania, Slovakia, Hungary, and this is obviously while they're all meeting. Biden is also pushing for Russia to be removed from G20. It seems unlikely that's going to happen. I think China will be resisting on that. But he says that if Russia can't leave, he might suggest that Ukraine can then be allowed to join. So we'll see what that means and what happens with that. The rest of the stuff we'll cover as we go along. But those are the main stories made headlines for this week. So the first thing we want to discuss is this plane crash in China. It was in Guangxi province, is that right, Tim?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, cool. So what do we know so far? I mean,
it's very mysterious. The aircraft was not malfunctioning. They're trying to investigate the disaster.
Yeah.
The pilot is well trained and well experienced. There were no signs of any kind of abnormalities so far. So so far we know nothing. That's
right. So, I mean, I think what I did see on this, which difficult footage to find, is footage what appears to be from a CCTV camera or something like that.
Yes, a CCTV camera of a mining company pointing at their mining field.
Right.
Where the crash took place.
Yeah, and the video I'm talking about is that you see the plane flying directly down. Have you seen that video? Is it the one you're talking about?
Of course. Here's the mysterious part, right? When they found the site, the aircraft has apparently disintegrated mid-air, but according to eyewitnesses around the mine, there were no explosions. If there is no explosions, then why the disintegration? And if there is the disintegration, then why is it that like the aircraft was falling at such a high speed, so on and so forth? There's a lot of things that are very inconsistent about this crash. And while in China, everyone's focus is kind of focused on this at the moment because it is so strange, and it is like 100 plus, more than 100 lives just kind of disappeared out of nowhere for no reason.
Right. I mean, so the black box apparently has been recovered. So one of the black
One
boxes
of it,
recovered.
right?
I mean,
the other has
there's always so one of them. Yeah, one of them. So there's always the chance that there's also suicide involved. This is something that we have to like consider now. Is after that, I think it was a Swiss or German pilot in the Alps who flew into the Alps a few years ago, where he locked the co-pilot out or whatever, and then just flew into the mountain. So there's always a potential for this as well. Yeah, but I think that the underlying one here is obviously 737. Everyone immediately is going, is this the MAX? Is this that, that malfunction that we talked about where
comparatively,
so this isn't
Airbus or Russia's kind of Soviet legacy jets has had less accidents than the 737, especially 737 MAX series. So,
right. I mean, also this is an interesting question about airlines, so not airlines, about aircraft manufacturing, right? So China doesn't, or does have its own jets, but still relies quite heavily on Boeing and Airbus. But they do have the C919.
What it is like commercial jets are a completely different kind of process than military or utility oriented jets, because it's focused on the smoothness of the ride and absolute reliability, right? So like what would be considered okay in terms of discomfort, right, in other aircrafts is in like aspects of noise or smoothness, gradual kind of acceleration, deceleration. That would be completely okay in any other form of aircraft. Is not okay for commercial jets. And also, you need to make it to be cost effective to the point where you are competitive on the international kind of airline markets, right? So that has been the reason why it's been very difficult to outcompete either Boeing or Airbus, even if you have like 97% of the the technological capabilities that they have, which is like what Russia does. That's what they have. Yeah. So it's like even from a Western perspective, it seems that the Chinese C919 series that's about to enter the market is a welcomed presence to kind of break up this kind of stalemate of leaving airlines and pilots with no choices but faulty products. I mean, this is a
right. I think also it's another. So in terms of sanctions, Boeing and Airbus are both, one's European and one's American, and they do have such a dominance on, commercial, passenger jets, and it's always one of the big tools, one of the big expensive hammers, let's say, for sanctions. So for Iran, right? So Iran has been struggling with its own domestic air.
Also, DPRK, it's gotten to the point where they are still flying the 1970s Tupolev jets.
Right.
To this day.
So this is probably, it's welcome to have at least another option for people to be able to pursue their own politics, nations pursue their politics. Okay, so I think we should just mention Madeleine Albright right now. Let's get her out of the way, so we can come back to what's happened in the real world rather than sort of an historical character dying. I think I don't want to sort of try and sort of come up with a description of how I feel about Madeleine Albright right now. I think that Jacobin has probably done an okay job on this one. So I'm just going to read some of what they have. So let's go here. 1 second. So this is Jacobin, right? So we've got right off the bat. So if you don't know who she is, Madeleine Albright was the first female Secretary of State for the U.S. But I think, as it says here, she was far more than that. She was an imperial ghoul, as ruthless in her pursuit of American global dominance as any man. She played a central role in crafting a post-Cold War policy that wrought devastation on multiple continents. Her biography was a harrowing one. Her family fled Nazi persecution when she was a child, and 26 of her relatives, of course, fleeing from the Holocaust. And then from 1993 to 1997, she served as the United Nations ambassador, US ambassador, of course. She then, I think, yes, let's take a look at some of her key moments. In a 1996 interview with Leslie Stahl of 60 Minutes, Albright seemed to suggest that the deaths of other people's children were simply a cost of doing empire. Quote, "We have heard that 500,000 children have died. I mean, that is more children than died in Hiroshima," said Stahl. And then she says, "And you know, is the price worth it?" Albright answered, "I think that is a very hard choice, but the price, we think the price is worth it." Jesus, okay. I assume she's talking about. I'm saying she's talking about the sanctions against the Iraqis. So 500,000 children died because of those sanctions.
Mm-hmm.
And she's saying that the price is worth it. 500,000 kids. Okay, that's the price for empire, according to Madeleine Albright. So other things that she's famous for, the Powell Doctrine. Okay. Yes, she's famous for this. So she was very much part of that. If you think about her age and her era, that's it. Because obviously Powell died.
The guy who showed up at United Nations with a can of white powder in his hand and saying this is proof for Iraq having chemical weapons and as a justification for the invasion of Iraq.
Right. Yeah, I mean,
for all we know, it could be granulated sugar. Who knows?
Exactly. I mean, if you actually brought chemical weapons to the UN
to the meeting hall, right?
To the meeting hall of the Security Council, that would be wild. If you did that, I don't believe you did, but so read about Arabia or Iraq. She was an imperialist ghoul. I think we agree with that one. Okay, so that's Madeleine Albright. Let's talk about the next story, which, just to mention, so we've already said it's the 19th anniversary of Iraq. 19 years since the invasion in 2003. But we want to talk about this hacking story now. So there's two hacking stories. So one is Pravda, and one is, of course, the Ministry of Defense. So if you want to talk about the Pravda thing, Jen, what happened with this?
Oh, of course. So this is suspected. It's suspected that the Ukrainian hackers hacked the original 1925 Pravda newspaper's website to then display like this ludicrous number of like 28,000 Russian casualties during the war. And then it was soon deleted, and Pravda came out to say that, hey, we were hacked, and it's a part of this info war going on with Ukraine. And I would say just like the kind of greater geo-military strategic scene, which has been very busy this week, extremely busy.
I think that in terms of the conflict, so we're kind of rolling into this one, but I think that's fine. I mean, the information war is, it hasn't stopped. It's been intense for weeks now since it started. I mean, we talked about Snake Island and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So just to finish with this specific thing about the hacking, so the British Minister of Defense was more of a prank call. So this prankster managed to get on a call with him, a video call, and we know it's not a fake because the Ministry of Defense has been telling YouTube to take down the video of what he says in that phone call. I'm not going to play it here because I don't want to. I don't want to get in trouble. But he he basically in this call is talking about. You can see it's a proper diplomatic call. So he doesn't say anything particularly like ridiculous. It's not like he says something crazy, but it's the concept that the British Minister of Defence someone manages to get into a video call with him and to discuss arms deals for supplying the Ukrainian side in the conflict. Yeah. So in the call, from the part we can see, the prankster talks about nuclear weapons. He's like, we really want nuclear weapons. That would really help us. And the British Minister of Defence is like, well, we want to be your partners. So very diplomatic. You'll say, say something along the lines of, we want to be your partners. We want to do, we want to help you. It's up to you if you want to pursue that. That would obviously make the Russians very angry. But he kind of, brushes. He doesn't give a sort of solid answer. Like, yes, we'll give you nukes. But what he does mention is he talks about NLAW. So the NLAW missile system, the anti-tank missile system, is being used in Ukraine by the Ukrainians, and the prankster says that they're having malfunctions with these things, and the British guy, the minister says, okay, well, we're not having problems with that, but he does say that they're running out. He says that we've got like he says we've got 4,000 something along those lines. But overall, I think the part that's interesting is the fact that some random prankster during this time, an intense conflict going on between Ukraine and Russia, manages to get into a call with the Minister of Defense, which is insane.
For sure. I mean, this is just like a general observation, right? Before the age of internet, a lot of it was still people in high positions are like covered in these kinds of artificial layers of what do they actually say, what their views actually are. Whereas with the information age, with stuff like this, and with people more and more like being daring and adventurous, let's just say, with trying to phone this person, trying to hack that person, right? You start to see more and more of the true faces, so to speak, of these people in high positions from all across the world, right? What was her name? The person that we talked about last week, who said "F Europe."
Victoria Nuland.
Yes, like she's a perfect example of that, right? Whereas, previously, like this kind of stuff would be like in closed doors, and no one would ever find out.
True. Yeah, I think that's another part of this was seeing how ordinary a phone call that a minister.
Hi, James. I'm having technical difficulties, and I cannot find the reason why. So I'll spend some money to buy a webcam next week, a different one. So that'll hopefully do it.
Yeah, it's okay. Technical problems.
Well, speaking of in-laws, I guess this is a good kind of way to segue into our next part, which is about all the military jets and missiles stuff that is going on.
Yeah, so there's 3 or 4 stories. So we've got hypersonic missile, we've got the sinking of the ship, we've got the North Koreans, and we've got the Switchblade drones, as well as the F-35 and J-20.
So I guess let's
F-35 J-20 first because it's separate to the other 3.
Yeah. So I guess let's cover the Western small arms missiles, the Switchblade and the NLAWs first. So the NLAWs, it's very interesting. It's a kind of before this whole conflict, the NLAW was like a theoretical concept thought up by the Americans, and it's this very simple, reliable, quote unquote reliable.
Wait,
but like in theory, it's supposed to be a reliable system because the way it works is that it simply, defines the range of the tank, right?
Yes.
And assuming that the tank isn't moving too fast, it will simply shoot a straight line to above, slightly above the tank, only by a few meters, and then detonate the shaped charge downwards to strike the tank. So it is a lot cheaper, as you can imagine. You only need to do some electronic modification of the traditional LAW, LAW rocket launcher to be able to do that. It is a lot cheaper. It is shorter range than the Javelin. It is obviously less powerful, and in some sense, Due to the fact that there only has like a range of 400 meters, it is you can both see it as more effective than a traditional kind of direct fire, unguided kind of rocket. But at the same time, it is also kind of redundant because in those kinds of ranges, the tank, machine gun, and main cannon is going to be able to cover you anyways. Not to mention the fact that these things, if you're all going to use it in an urban setting, then the shooter would most likely be shooting from a higher elevated position compared to the tank, so they would be hitting the top of the vehicle anyways. So
Yeah.
it is this kind of theoretical kind of next step evolution in shorter range anti-tank rocket launchers that is
Yes.
has its merits, but is also definitely overhyped.
Yeah.
But like it's better than traditional direct fire rockets. That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not.
Well, I mean, so
It's been seen as like one of those kind of last hanging straw, right? That the Ukrainian and the pro-Ukrainian people are kind of, at least in terms of information war, narrative war. This is the piece of gear that they're hanging on to as like the Hail Mary, right? But like for such an rudimentary guided anti-tank weapon, because all it is like a laser pointer, a computer that is like way less powerful than a cell phone, and then a few more mechanisms to a shaped charge, right? Rocket.
Yeah.
For such a cheap piece of gear to be running out in the West, that really is a testament to the kind of waning, decreasing manufacturing capability of the West. And because, this weapon is not hard to create at all for any industrial power, really. It's a fairly rudimentary piece of technology. Its merit is in its easiness to manufacture, its ease of manufacturing. But for that to even be kind of lacking, that is very surprising.
Right.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
Okay.
Go
ahead.
Okay, I was gonna move on to the Switchblade. So, like
let's talk about the Switchblade. Yeah.
I guess
I'll make one comment. I do think that for the Ukrainians, it is doing. It's undeniable that it is doing a lot of damage to the Russians. The NLAW. I mean, compared to the Russians have put these cages on top of their tanks, which was supposed to stop with Javelin as well as potentially with NLAW, but they are kind of redundant. So those things would actually help against the RPGs, which the Ukrainians do have.
Well, okay. So what's been happening is like javelins are still reasonably effective, whereas those cages on the top of the tank, which looks like rooftops and tents, combined with mid to late generation reactive armors, are actually extremely effective against NLAWs. During the beginning of the battle, we had this footage of this master sergeant guy that's in control of a Ukrainian battalion, right? Just completely surrendering. Yeah. He surrendered after their forces fired like more than a dozen NLAWs onto Russian tanks, and it didn't do much. And it is because of those welded on rooftop looking things combined with the power of reactive armor. Which,
I think the reactive armor is more to do with this. To be honest,
that's fair.
I don't want to get into the technical side of this, but there's a way that the NLAW bursts that it negates that cage. The cage is more for RPG, but let's not get into the technical stuff. Let's move on to the Switchblade stuff.
Switchblade, along with, the Ukrainian battlefield right now is just turning into a place of higher and higher tech weapons. So in this aspect, it's very similar to the Spanish Civil War, where multiple sites are kind of testing out theories and both in weapons and also tactics. So Biden, United States, is going to send this thing called a Switchblade to the Ukrainian forces to help them to have a bit more reach in terms of in-depth striking capabilities against the Russians, because so far Russia is the side with the overwhelming monopoly on that. So what it is a think a Tomahawk, right? A cruise missile that is slow, but
Mhm.
it is guided by AI and is able to guide itself to places, right? And fly at
Mm.
lower altitudes, so you can fly in between, say, mountain valleys to not be seen, and so on and so forth. But it is that,
Mhm.
but it is small, so small, in fact, that a two-man team can operate it. And it is guided by GPS. Of course, you can set what target you want to strike. And
Yeah,
so this
look at
would
the footage
provide a
here.
lot
So,
of trouble for the Russian side. And if because the technology to stop this kind of stuff would only be seen on T90, T90S, and T14 Armada, top of the line advanced Russian tanks. Either you can use active protective systems on those tanks, which Russia did not use those equipments in this war at all, so that's not available to Russia in this
okay.
battle. And also, another thing to do be stop that would be like a close-in anti-missile miniguns that are ripped from naval ships. That would
Yeah.
be the other kind of technology, but those things are so incredibly heavy that no land forces can transport that. It either
Yeah.
has to sit by a stationary thing, or it is carried on large warships. So in
Mhm.
reality, Russia is going to be running into trouble with these things
Yeah.
because once these kinds of quote unquote unstoppable long range weapons, accurate weapons get involved, anything is on the table. Anything that exists can be struck, and it is very evasive. And so that's where that is going for Russia.
Mhm. Yeah, I think in terms of what you just said about the technology,
Mm.
so the fact that they've got the Switchblade being asked to be used, you've got obviously Javelin and Enlaw are all there,
Mm.
as well as all sorts of Russian kit. But the big story this week in terms of hardware, military hardware, is this story about the hypersonic missile.
Yes.
So let's go into this. So
Yeah.
this was the first time that a hypersonic missile was used by anyone
Any
in combat.
nation in combat. Right.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, the missile itself is the dagger, right? The Kinjal, is
Exactly.
that right? Yeah, Kinjal.
Yeah.
So I'll get some footage up here, but
Yeah.
yeah, what do you want to say about this one, Jen?
Well, it's hypersonics from what we've seen. So it's been used twice by Russian aerospace forces. The first time was against a
Yeah,
barracks of all things near a nuclear facility that stored like Soviet era
yeah.
nuclear warheads in Ukraine. The second time it was against the an oil stockpile, right? Uh,
Yeah.
So it's being seen like the two kinds of uses that this weapon can be used. The first time it was used against the barracks was fairly mysterious. Reason being that like the only like you could have just done that attack with a regular bomb. You don't need a missile that flies at 7 to 10 times the speed of sound from a supersonic strategic
Yes.
aircraft to do that. It's just way too much money.
Yeah.
So the
Yeah.
suspicion that's been going around is that they were trying to strike a time sensitive target. Some individual or groups of very important individuals that were secretly traveling in Ukraine, probably NATO. They were only stopped in the barracks for
Yeah.
like 30 minutes. So how do you strike something long,
Mhm.
far, far away that is only available for 30 minutes? How do you hit that kind of time-sensitive target while you use the hypersonic missile? And the second time,
Yeah.
it makes more sense. It was an underground oil stockpile. And in order to
Mhm.
destroy the oil pumps that would extract the oils barrels out of the underground to make
Mhm.
it available to troops to fuel up without damaging the entire oil stockpile, you use this missile
Mhm.
to because it travels at such high speeds, it has the ability to penetrate deep into the earth. And that is how they were able to destroy very accurately also the oil pump apparatus
Mhm.
without igniting any of the oil, which shows the kind
Mhm.
of capabilities of these weapons. And not to mention the fact that Russia can fire these things from aircrafts that is traveling at 2.5 to 3 times speed of sound, which is the MiG-31.
Yeah. Yeah.
UN.
So I think that's an important part to add, is that they fired it from a MiG-31, it seems, so, which is itself a super fast jet,
Exactly.
high speed interceptor or super interceptor, whatever. But even I think you've obviously provided the tactical side as to like what they struck and some sort of reasoning why they used the munition, that particular munition. But I have heard other people sort of comment on the fact that even if they had used it just against any target, in itself, the usage of a hypersonic missile is kind of also a show of force, showing that they're ready to use them.
Yeah.
And also,
go ahead.
Yeah, the West. So even on CNN, openly, there was a military analyst on there saying that there is nothing that the West can do to counter this.
Precisely.
They have nothing to stop it.
Precisely.
And that was
electoral things just don't move fast enough to stop that. The West has really been suffering a lot in terms of trying to develop technologies to counter that. One, the West, America developing its own hypersonics, that failed miserably. The second idea was to use electric railguns because it is fast enough to hit those things.
Yeah.
That also got canceled. So, the guy is right. There is nothing the West can do to stop it. And so now the general point is this. The Ukrainian battlefield itself has become this place of
testing ground,
sci-fi level weapons, just hitting anything and everything possible, essentially. That's what we're going to be seeing in the future.
Right. Okay, so we also need to mention this one. So on Russia Today, they broadcasted, I guess we can call it propaganda. Yeah, it was a showpiece. They showed I think it's the Osa troop ship, a big transport ship, docking in Berdyansk, which is a port next to Mariupol.
Yeah.
And
by the way, they have taken Mariupol now. That's the.
Have they?
Mostly. They've leveled.
Yeah, so I think there's still a few people hanging around.
Yeah, but it's for all practical purposes they've taken it.
Yeah, no, they're holding out. It's pretty much theirs. I think so, but I don't think they're I don't think it's fully taken. I still think they have a few blocks left. Whoever's left in there. But so coming back to this story about the ship. So Russia Today showed the ship offloading vehicles, armored vehicles, a big ship, kind of a show of force again, kind of a sort of parade moment, let's call it that. And apparently then that ship in that port has been hit with something. So something big hit that, whether it was a cruise missile or artillery, we don't know. And that ship might have been sunk. So kind of a blow to the sort of Russian,
also to mention, it might not be.
Nonetheless, though, I think a distraction from Mariupol.
Yeah. What I was going to say
is it's not confirmed yet.
There's video of it too. It's from this point onward, I would really advise people who are looking at this to just stop looking at targets and stuff as of any significance, because again, as I was trying to emphasize, with the involvement of these levels of high-tech weaponry, anything can be killed. Doesn't matter how well hidden you are, or it doesn't matter how far away you are.
Yeah.
It's this kind of the spear and the shield evolution, right? We are obviously at the stage where the spear is way more powerful than the shield, to the point where anything is on the table. And so, on the one hand, it wouldn't surprise me. On the other hand, things are very obscure in this regard. That it's not valuable information. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I think this is true. And the other thing to say, which is about the fact that on one side, Western media and Western reporting and Western perspectives on this are very one-sided. So they will take what Ukraine says, what Ukrainian experts say, what Ukrainian military officials say, and report it. And I can't even really, it's quite difficult to access the Russian side of this stuff. So particularly in the British press, and I assume the US too, is that you only have one side of the story. You're not getting a balanced view. And it's a war, so, you can't expect one side to surrender.
Right.
Yeah.
To another example, the United Nations is actually going to meet about Russia's claim of American bioweapons in Ukraine. But then if you look at the American coverage of that, they will admit that the meeting is taking place. But then the whole article is just like several pages of essentially repeating, this is Russian propaganda, these 4 words in like different arrangements. Instead of actually, giving proper coverage of the event and seeing what Russia's kind of whole investigative statement is, which is just another example of what you were just talking about, Richard.
Yeah, man. I mean, in terms of other missile news,
right?
The North Koreans actually have fired off an ICBM. Tested an ICBM, which is, again.
Well, they've been firing supposedly two recon satellites of their own, and an ICBM. Okay. So it's been a very concentrated kind of launch, along with in South China Sea region, China and U.S. Have been having standoffs with the F-35 American. Jet fighter, stealth jet fighter, and the Chinese J-20 air superiority fighter. And this statement came out of the United States. It was like a former Air Force commander who spoke about these encounters. It's not the first time it took place, but it is the first time it has been disclosed by either side. And so I would say, okay, the first law, the logic of how DPRK chooses to launch their missile is one, for attention, but also two, more fundamentally, is to support Russia or China in any kind of tense situation within the kind of international standoff scene. And obviously, Russia's war in Ukraine and the Chinese-U.S. encounter in the sea with the most advanced jets would constitute that level of intensity. And so what we're seeing essentially is this kind of China, DPRK, and Russia kind of standing together essentially as one. Whereas United States, NATO is kind of the other entity, let's just say, and it is the two kind of in full kind of in China it is already referred to as a warm war, as in we are indeed moving closer to global total war. Closer than ever before, even during the Cold War itself, ever since the Cuban Missile Crisis, at least.
Yeah,
and this is just a modern iteration of that, and is quite interesting. So regarding the F-35 versus J-20, what it is that J-20 is built for pure air superiority, whereas J-35 is this classic thing of trying to cram too many functions into one project, and it is bad at all of the functions. Though they're all stealth jets, J-20 is infinitely more maneuverable and speedy. According to some sources, J-20 can reach the speed of Mach 3 when in maximum throttle at high altitude. Not to mention its canards design makes it extremely maneuverable. Also, the American Air Commander straight up admitted in his public statement that China has, with our KJ Air Warning 2000, and the massive amounts of it have aerial reconnaissance, aerial command superiority in all of the Western Pacific, because American Air Warning Air Command (AWACS) planes, that's what those are called, are spread all across the world, and they're of older technology, whereas
Yeah.
Chinese ones are concentrated in one zone and is of higher tech and higher capability. The AWACS planes are extremely important for aerial combat. They are the long-range kind of eyes. Think video games. They are the map hack of air superiority fighting, essentially. So you can imagine,
Right.
in simulations all across the world done by all sorts of air forces, they've shown that with AWACS planes, even inferior aircrafts can win very often against superior aircrafts. So, but there's just one caveat: J-20 is a superior aerial fighter than the F-35.
In terms of actual,
So China essentially has full spectrum dominance in the Western Pacific, and it's this kind of China DPRK kind of doing these actions to kind of alleviate some pressure off of the backs of Russia as a part of this alliance, and that's been the kind of strategic picture that's been happening across the world.
Yeah, interesting stuff. Okay, so if you want to, if there's anything else on the news, I think on the military stuff, I think we're kind of
that's the global picture, and that's everything.
Yeah. No, that's good stuff. Good stuff. I think what we should talk about now, I think, is the rubles for gas. So this is a very important story. So let's go for the Moscow Times on this one. So can you see that? Yeah, you can see that. So Russia. So this is a big shift, and we've been talking about the shift in terms of how energy is paid for in the world. So UN for oil is being discussed by Saudi Arabia, and now Russia's sort of said, okay, Russia's basically demonstrated. I think the phrasing is quite funny that Putin used. He said something about unfriendly nations. So these unfriendly nations have declared themselves to be unfriendly, so you're going to have to pay for your gas in rubles. So basically, particularly for Europe, so Europe obviously has to get most of its gas, the majority of its gas from Russia, and the announcement of payment is going to be in rubles. So I mean, obviously the Germans are not happy with this. They're saying it's a breach of contract and whatnot. So I mean, 55% of its gas comes from Russia.
Germany. Oh my God. Canceling Nord Stream 2 is breach of contract. I mean, come on.
That's also a breach of contract, right? I'm sure somewhere in there. Yeah. I mean, do you have any comments on this one, Jen, about what this signifies or what this means, or any thoughts on this?
Yeah, this is just I would say this is just yet another thing that is a fallout of the statement that I made, which is the world going from a unipolar system to a dual / multipolar system.
Multipolar,
essentially, this is a part of Russia aligning with Asia as a part of the future of all of human civilization, really. And Germany. A few things first. Essentially, what we're seeing right now is this collective alignment. If anybody remember Brzezinski's, grand chessboard, when he's talking about the nightmare combo. Okay, sorry to use casual language for the West. Would be China, Iran, and Russia uniting not out of ideological reasons, but out of practical reasons. Well, what we're now seeing is both, and then some. China, the Slavic realm, minus Ukraine, Poland, and the entire Middle Eastern Islamic civilization seems to be uniting. So in Middle East, right? There's the infamous divide between Sunnis and Shiites, and Saudi Arabia doesn't get along with Iran, so on and so forth, right? Well, surprise, surprise, Saudi Arabia and Iran have both decided that as a part of the Islam, as the two kind of pillars of the Islamic world, they will not. They will actually stand united, being against the NATO and against the West in terms of energy trade, which currency to conduct a trade of oil in. And I would say that going back to this Russia's action here, well, it is just yet another part of that. They're doing the same choice. They're making the same choices that Saudi Arabia and Iran made of how to of which currency will they trade their energy in, and the three of them together, I would say that's already the majority of the oil and gas of the entire planet. And so that we need to look at it together because that kind of shift of balance on the pendulum is huge, is not to be underestimated. And it puts Western Europe in a place where they essentially have to make a choice. And that's what we're seeing.
Yeah. I think because we know that the gas will be paid for, or the demand is being that Russian gas is paid for with rubles. But I do actually want to look into this yuan for oil, because that actually, to be honest, on balance is a bigger story, because
of course
Russian gas is only really a problem or major problem for Europe, Western Europe, so they have to pay for the gas.
And China is the biggest market to purchase oil because all production and logistics and transportation happens there.
Yeah, right, exactly. So, but this is obviously the petrodollar and all that kind of stuff, talking about how you have to buy oil in dollars, and that being the sort of supreme status of the dollar as the international currency for more than 50 years.
So that's like one of the two fundamental pillars of the U.S. dollar, right? It is the credit, which of how credible the federal government of the United States is, and then it's oil. That is the two pillars of the U.S. dollar, and it seems that one of the pillars has just been completely sabotaged.
Yeah, I mean, so the thing is, it's interesting that it seems to be the Saudis are actually the ones who pitched it, or they're very active in the talks to price some of its oil sales of China in the currency. I mean, technically this is not started. So it's been on and off for 6 years, but accelerated this year. So obviously because this year is only 3 months old, so it's obviously because of the conflict. There's been no other real story since the start of the year. So that's interesting, though. I'm trying to see what's else in here. So 3% trade, so I still want currency exchanges here, but the whole Russian conflict has brought this further forward, right? So this has been rushed ahead
because as we predicted before, the conflict in Ukraine is more than just war in Europe, World War III. No. It's about which continent and which form of production do you choose to align with. Is it going to be the Afro-Eurasia of people and of at least not finance capital? I won't say outright socialism. Or is it going to be NATO, the kind of Atlantic, Oceania, kind of imperialist finance capital dominance, right? And Saudi Arabia, it seems that they have made their choice. They've made their mind up. And that's quite significant. To compound to that, Biden has at least verbally threatened China to sanction China even further. Which, I don't even know how that is going to work. If they do that, the United States will collapse, and all the members of the MTT here in the United States are going to have to be living in Mad Max if he does that.
Right. I think so. I also heard some sort of reports. It was more of a nothing concrete, but about sanctioning Chinese companies that were breaking the embargo and the sanctions on Russia. And again, it came back to tech companies and chips, which is the sort of is the weak spot, or the strong card that the US does still have is in relation to chip
commercial chip manufacturing.
At least on the research side, not the production side, but still they have.
Because on the production side, China is the only presence in the United States
Mhm.
in terms of manufacture that is still expanding and is still growing healthily. If it
Mm.
decides to sanction China on that, it has just shot itself in the stomach, not the foot. Like,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I cannot imagine what is going through their mind right now. This is like a level of stupidity and insanity that we simply have not seen ever. I would argue in American history. And
Yeah.
no, this is actually worse than Trump. Because at least Trump
Right.
cared about the short-term interest of the United States, whereas, like, what is this?
Right. Right. Yeah, that would be a pretty terrible situation if sanctioning China, which makes everything, produces almost all of the goods that are used, or at least, if not the good itself, the components that make up the good
Right.
for almost every item in the
Mhm.
economy, in the global economy, is in
Yeah.
some way linked to the Chinese production chain.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be something that I don't know, we can't really imagine. That would be
Right.
something
Right.
never been seen in the West, particularly.
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay, so we've covered actually all of our stories. I mean, we've discussed Madeleine Albright,
Yeah,
we've discussed
we have.
Iraq, we've discussed the hacking, Pravda, of course, UN Council meeting to discuss the Russia.
There is
Ukraine.
one more thing. I
Yeah.
don't know if it would technically be this week, but it's definitely interesting to mention, which is that after the 7-hour meeting in Rome between China
Yeah.
and U.S. diplomatic teams the week before, immediately it was followed up by a call, by a video call from Biden to
Yeah.
Xi Jinping, in which the statement is a kind of where the United States completely capitulated in China into giving into all of China's demands of respecting territorial sovereignty, not attempting regime change, etc., etc. Right. And basically, Xi Jinping made this like 3-minute statement saying that condemning Biden for not able to control uh, his own country and not being able to follow up on promises that he has made to China, which is extremely severe, something that we have never seen. So, like, after the call, all like American journalists were asking questions to the White House, as you can imagine, and journalists tried to confront Biden about, did China cave in? Is China going to get sanctioned? Is China going to denounce Russia? Is China going to condemn Russia for its invasion, etc., etc.? And then it was just this extremely brutal and awkward 30-minute session of Biden saying, stuttering in his words, and saying, "Well, 27 times." I've actually read the whole report, whole transcript, and I've counted that myself, and not giving any kind of solid answer. Typical politician dodging speech about, well, that's the wrong question. That's not the best. That's not the question. You should. The real question is, that kind of talk. But essentially saying that, well, we don't know if China is going to denounce Russia. If you want to find out, you need to talk to China. You need to talk to Beijing. That's basically the 30 minutes of stuttering summed down to one sentence. And for Biden to then, like, essentially, effectively not tell that to the American people, you have seen none of those reports in the kind of American mainstream media. So very good cover up there. Well done. I'm saying that sarcastically. But then to turn back around to say, like, oh, China, we're going to sanction you. Pick the right side of history. You're on the wrong side of history. This is like, I don't usually try to degrade politics down to the level of comedy, but this is a joke. This is a farce. It would be equivalent of, two guys getting into a bar fight, one guy chickening out, but then telling all his friends that you won the fight. That's effectively
Right.
what this is. I mean, it's the same principle, just on a larger scale. I mean,
Right.
and combined with all the kind of international military strategic things, complexity that's going on.
Yeah.
There's no definitive statements, obviously, but I would just say that we are in a very interesting time where, you know, and it's
Yeah.
funny. I would say like the primary contradiction of the world right now is that the West one, which is the primary, is the okay. So the secondary is this: the West cannot stop its own decay. It cannot control the deterioration of its own imperialist societies. And two is that China, along with other, non-NATO aligned nations, are finding ways out of colonialism to where they are able to more and more, because the hands of the West is like the grip of the Western hands are weakening, right? Of the hands of imperialism is weakening. More and more countries are able to more and more kind of normalize their ability to govern, to manage, and to produce for their own interests. So we are seeing this dramatic, like in Chinese academia, there is this huge conversation about the post-Western era, the
Yes.
post-West international politics, right? And it could mean all sorts of things. Some say that it already began back in, say, the 90s, where the percentage of the GDP of the West compared to the rest of the world is going down. But really, kind of on a conceptual level, I would say that COVID would be the true start of this kind of beginning of the post-Western age. And essentially what we are going to witness is that, and this is a bit of a predictive statement, but what I'm going to say is this. All non-civilization based nation states are going to have a very hard time in even surviving. It might just start melting, disintegrating, because there was an Israeli history scholar that said essentially something to the effect of the liberal world order is best, and Russia's war in Ukraine has set humanity back to the Stone Ages and made us all barbarians. Because it is, the strong do what they can, weak suffer what they must, and all that, without looking at the NATO, Russia context, as you have explained many times before.
Yeah.
But what this truly tells me is that this artificial world order based on liberalism is just straight up dying. Again, as I mentioned before, with how the international law as we know them is created. It's an artificial consensus, it's not reality. And this fever dream, essentially, of the planets where this artificial order is not sustainable because it's not reality. So now that everybody is close to going back to square one to see, how do we actually conduct realistic diplomacy and achieve peace?
Yeah.
And that's essentially this kind of reshuffling of the decks of the cards that is the international world order, right?
Yeah. I think you're playing a good analysis on the overall situation. So the long-term picture, what this means for, as you say, the multipolar world, the civilization states, where things are heading in the grand scheme of things, the post-Western politics, post-Western dominance of politics, we should say. I don't think the West will disappear.
No, of course.
I don't think that will happen. But we will see. I think in terms of where this has happened, what's happened so far this week has been pretty. We've had, again, technology was the highlight of this week.
Yes.
Hypersonic vehicles, all sorts of drones,
right.
And then of course on the economic side, so it's technology and then gas and rubles. So.
It does, I would say,
energy politics and technology politics. That's what we saw.
I don't know about you, Richard, but for me, like the past 2 weeks specifically of looking at the news across the world, right? I find it to be more obscure, more like hidden behind fogs and curtains than it used to be. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, no, that's the other part of everything in the last month is the fact that there are different realms of information. If we talk about spheres of influence, there are
Right.
spheres of information, and
Yeah.
some people are living in completely different. Well, everyone's living in a completely different zone.
Yeah.
And we are being further and further pushed into different spheres of information.
Yeah.
That's another thing that we've noticed.
Yeah. So like it's been increasingly like less about our ability to find articles to discuss per se, but about how to use inductive and deductive reasoning. Inductive being dialectical thinking, of course, dialectical logic, to like find useful trends of the world in the global picture. Because with fragmented information, right, you really can't make sense of it just by saying, is this data point correct or incorrect? You know, it's really becoming more and more about how do you connect everything to everything else that we know to have a reasonably accurate guess as to what the actual situation is. I mean, that's certainly been a lot of our work with Ukraine, I would say, where all these fragmented bits and pieces of information, we have to like basically guess at if something is legitimate or not. You know, based off of all sorts of knowledge.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah. No, that is a certain true. It's been very difficult to actually make concrete statements. There is one side, and also there's on one part there's the information itself, the facts. So what actually happened, and then if you can get those, you're lucky.
Right.
What we're usually getting, and I think actually of all people, I only saw the tagline. I don't know what he said, so I wouldn't want to give him too much credit. But John Stewart said that on a tagline, he said, "The media is not reporting events; they're creating narratives." And we've discussed this narrative analysis, narrative war. So that's the thing that we're seeing so much of. We're seeing a reduction of facts and an increase in narratives. Look at these brave soldiers fighting. Look at these international volunteers coming to help this terrible struggle. Look at the barbarism and the brutality of Russian weapons. Meanwhile, ignoring that Ukrainians also have weapons and artillery and whatnot.
Yeah, and they've been barbarizing people for 8 years.
And also they're not mentioning, oh, look, these Russians are ransacking things here. Okay, but also Ukrainian Azov battalion people were shelling and ransacking
their own people.
For 8 years. They're in people, right? But anyway, we don't have time to go into a full-blown, deep philosophical and look at the narrative wars right now. I mean, we have been discussing that.
I would just make one quick statement. It's almost as if the people behind crafting the art of narrative warfare has managed to bring the state of journalism back to where it was in the mid 1800s. Where every country has their own newspaper and there is no objective facts across the world. Just now with higher sophistication, and it makes our job very difficult.
No, it is becoming difficult to find balanced perspective on this stuff. But anyway, that's all we have time for this week. So next week we'll be back. Hopefully, Jen's camera will be back, and we will have some more news of the week, of course. So thank you for joining us, and we'll speak to you next week.
Take care.
Bye-bye.